Hello and welcome back to another edition of the ASCA Weekly Podcast. I am your host, Charles Fallon, back in here for a new season. We're about to get another edition of Speed Weeks underway in less than a week. It's hard to believe. It feels like we were just wrapping up the 2024 campaign at Belltown yesterday, and then getting the announcement that Nick Urquidy would be announcing his retirement the last time we talked. And we were crowning Diego Urquidy as champion, talking about this Urquidy Racing dynasty. And well, here we are in less than a week, about to run it back and do it all over again for the 2025 campaign. And there's a lot of different storylines we need to discuss today. Obviously, this is the preseason edition. And unfortunately, I do not have my good co-host, Nick Douglas, back for this edition, which is a shame. But, we're going to continue and push along, push forward, and just kind of break down some of the biggest stories of, the 2025 campaign so far. So let's get right into it. But first, I want to shout out the ASCA's premier partners and the podcast premier partners. Of course, the same from last year. Rowdy Energy. You already know. Click the link in the ASCA's link tree down in the description box below. Go get yourself some Rowdy Energy to fresh and refuel you while you're listening to this podcast. And then also Circle B Diecast Plan B sales. Each coupon code ASCA for any free shipping on any orders $20 or more inside the United States. If you want to get replica diecast of the new scheme Todd Kidd has this year, replica diecast of the one that Diego Urquidy won a championship in last year, replica diecast that big names are using, like Shane Parks, brand new fresh scheme, or Colin Ward. You want to get his replica diecast? Head on over to circlebdiecast.com, planbsales.com, and use coupon code ASCA for free shipping on any orders $20 or more. So let's get right into it. And I think the biggest story to come out of the off season so far, and obviously there were a couple, and obviously one of the bigger stories was Chris Barrymore and the situation with him and him threatening his retirement. And we're going to talk more about him later on and kind of the silly season implications and, the Barrymore sweepstakes and all that. But I think the bigger story for sure is the fact that a 5-time winner, 22 years of age, Laquon Scransen, his career is in serious jeopardy right now. And we all know the story that there's an FBI investigation into Scransen and his cohorts, dating back to his April 2024 arrest. It seemed like that, he posted bail, he got off scot-free. It looked to be that way. But the FBI has obviously opened an investigation into him. They've seen something that they don't like, or you could say, in terms of getting a conviction. And right now, inside sources are saying that it's not looking good. And there is a real possibility that Scransen could be jailed mid-season and not be able to compete for the 2025 Ajax Cup Championship. And we're talking about a guy that was fourth in points last year, that won 3 races, that led the most laps of anyone, 544 last season. And there's a real possibility that, especially if the FBI does hit him with a RICO case, a RICO charge, racketeering, that sort of thing, that's 20 years to life. So it's really not looking good for Laquon and his long-term future. And, for Dexter Andrews Motorsports, what do? They obviously did bring in Derek Lewis to come back potentially as that substitute driver, that reserve fill-in role if Scransen is arrested and jailed. And they don't allow him to post bail like he's been able to do the past couple of times he's been arrested mid-season. It feels different. It feels like the walls are closing in on the Compton native, and you hate to see it, honestly. The kid has so much talent, so much potential. Again, he's only 22 years of age. He's won 5 cup races. He finished 4th in points last year. He was going to easily be a championship favorite had this situation not cropped up. So him being potentially ousted, 3, 5, 7, 10 races into the season, while he could be on a title run, that is huge news. So we'll have to follow the situation to kind of see where it goes. But obviously, it's kind of grim, kind of gloomy for Dexter Andrews Motorsports in that regard. And, we'll have to see what they do and if they can find a solution to all this and still be competitive with that number 42 team. Obviously, they do have Marcus Edwards still there. And I believe, that certainly helps to have him there. But this is going to be interesting to see kind of what goes on there. So with Scransen potentially out of the picture, I will not be including him in this next segment, the projected title contenders in 2025, because obviously we don't know if he's going to be able to complete the full season behind the wheel of the number 42. And if he can't, obviously he's not going to win the title. So in terms of the projected title contenders from last year, if you exclude Scransen, obviously there's still 3 names that come to mind. There's arguably the GOAT of the ASCA, 25-time Ajax Cup winner, 4-time Ajax Cup champion. You all know what I'm talking about. Reigning Cup champion, actually, Diego Urquidy. Obviously, he's got to be number 1, even at the age of 34. There appear to be no signs of him slowing down anytime soon, thanks to Baller Time or anything, especially with this newfound finesse that he has developed over the course of the past couple of years, since finally calming down and getting therapy and getting married and settling down. It appears Urquidy has developed into a new man and a completely different driver, honestly. One that's way more focused on, instead of trying to one-up his competitors, he just wants to win races and score the most amount of points possible and win championships. That's all it's focused on, not these petty rivalries and back and forths. He just wants to settle things on the track. And this new grown-up version of Diego, you're gonna have a hard time stopping him, honestly. I really do believe that. Then, when it comes to guys who can catch the GOAT or challenge him and maybe even defeat him, I think obviously the biggest thing that comes to mind would be Todd Kidd and how close he has come all of these years. 5 straight years of finishing within the top 3 in points, 0 championships to show for it. And that's tough. He's got 11 career wins now, a Windows 200 winner, Ajax 200 winner, no titles. So it's like, man, when is he going to finally be able to break through? And, I just don't know. Will it be this year? It very well could be. But I don't think it helps that he's got a teammate that's right up there that can challenge him for that title, and that would be Shane Park. 2nd in points last year, really impressive effort for him in only his 4th season. 24 years of age now. He's got a long ways to go to develop. Obviously, he still needs to score a win on an oval track. I think that will obviously come in due time. But, he's still got a long ways to go to develop. And he's just getting started in the prime of his career. So Shane Park, I think, is certainly another guy that you can look at and say, okay, I can see him challenging for a title this year. Cameron Atwood, 2023 champion, super inconsistent last season, but even with the DNFs, I think he had 6 or something insane. He still finished 5th in points. So that just goes to show you that if he can cut out some of the bad luck and the DNFs, he can then definitely be right back up there in contention. He's making big money now at CJ Barrymore Racing. They've invested a lot into basically naming him as the number 1 lead driver. I think that's obvious with Chris Barrymore now actively wanting out and his situation and the pleading. Some would call it temper tantrum pleading. Get me out of here, because I know that Atwood is that dude and he's making $12 million a season. I think he's certainly an option to be a title contender. Greg Healy, 2022 champion. Another guy in the prime of his career, 28 years old. Atwood's 29. Kid is 29. These guys are in the prime of their careers. And that's why I think, he's another guy that I think the equipment has been holding him back, actually, for Healy. I think for Atwood, Kidd, and Park, they have the equipment to challenge, but they just haven't been able to put it all together to beat a Diego Urquidy. Or, in the case of Atwood, he did it once, but can he repeat that historic feat? Same thing for Healy. But for Healy, really the last 2 years has been a lack of equipment. He has finished 6th in points the past 2 years. He has not won a race, not at Belltown Speed Park since 2022, his title winning campaign. That's 2 years of no wins outside of Belltown Speed Park. And Healy, he's much more than just a short track expert. We saw he won the Windows 300. We saw he won the West Banco 250 while sick, mind you, the flu race, so Healy, he can perform. And I really do believe that, for Greg, he needs the equipment, and maybe the crew chief swap, maybe having Lucas Lambert in there to help him out with R&D. I think that could certainly get him right back up there to competing for a title. It's going to be tough, but yeah, Healy, I think, is another guy that's going to be right up there competing for a championship. And then, in terms of, is there a breakout star or a guy who wasn't in the mix last year that might be in the mix this year? I would actually say it probably would be Randall Woods. Honestly, we've kind of seen that Woods in odd number seasons goes off. And I know. He's 37 years old now. He's old. I get it. He's the second oldest driver of the sport right now. But Woods has proven, at odd number seasons, that is his time to shine. He's been in championship contention before. He knows how to win these things. You can never count him out, no matter how old he is. We saw it. He did at age 35, just a couple years ago, all the way until the end when the meltdown happened. And I think the reason he wasn't a title contender last year wasn't because of him. It was because the team, Michael Racing as a whole, lacked pace. So I think Woods is also a guy who you cannot count out. It's weird to call him a dark horse title threat, but I really think he is, because not enough people are talking about him as a real deal title contender. So that, I think, Woods needs to be right up there as one of those guys that can compete for a championship. Does Diego complete the drive for 5, though? We talked about Kidd, we talked about Park, we talked about Atwood, we talked about Healy, we talked about Woods. And if you want to throw some other guys in there, like a Bryn Renard, you want to throw, who knows, maybe a Nick Urquidy, career resurgence in his final season. You want to throw him in there. You want to throw a Colin Ward in there. He burst on the scene his rookie year. Who knows? Fine. But, or maybe even Laquon Scransen, if he does run the whole season, throw him in there too. But are any of them good enough to knock off Diego Urquidy completing the drive for 5? I question that. And I know that in my, preseason article, I predicted, I believe, Shane Park to win the championship. But realistically, do they have anything to knock off Diego Urquidy? And I think a big part of this that we're not talking about when it comes to Diego and the drive for 5 and championship fight this year, it's obviously the news that the ASCA is switching to turbo hybrid engines in 2026. So obviously teams right now are already once that was announced, they're already working on development for next year. But they also obviously have to put out drivers and cars for this year. So it's an interesting kind of dichotomy that these teams are kind of forced to deal with right now. Like, what do? Do you sacrifice this year and go all in on development to make sure you're dominant from 2026 and beyond for however long the ASCA keeps the turbo hybrid engines? Or do you go all in this year, put all your chips in this basket, like, hey, some teams are going to be half and half, some are going to be 75 next year, 25 this year, some are going to be 75 this year, 25 next year. We're going to go all in this year. Screw next year. We're going to chase the championship right here, right now. That's what we're doing. And it's such an interesting kind of discussion to have, I think, when it comes to this, because if you do choose that latter option, you are sacrificing potentially the rest of the decade if you're behind. But if you choose the former option, you're sacrificing this year. So what will big organizations like TD Bros Racing or Ronnie Woods Motorsports, a CJ Barrymore Racing, what are they going to do here? What will smaller organizations like a Snoots Enterprises, Dexter Andrews Motorsports, what are they going to do here? I can definitely see a BAM potentially sacrificing this year, especially if Laquon Scransen is gone. I can see them sacrificing this year. I can see Snoots Enterprises throwing away this year and kind of focusing on next year, considering Healy, next year will be a contract year for Healy. So, it's a really tough dichotomy. I think the bigger teams will obviously have a much easier time of deciding where they're going to go with all of this. But I think for smaller teams, it's certainly going to be a tough situation because they just don't have the personnel and the funds that a Ronnie Woods Motorsports and TD Bros Racing or even a Michael White Racing, considering they're the factory Toyota team, they just don't have those funds that those guys have. So it's very interesting to kind of see, like, okay, are they going to go all in or what? And I think that's going to make driver talent matter so much more this year. The fact that teams aren't going to spend as much time in the wind tunnel as they probably would, and that they won't have as many changes and aero upgrades and all these things to try to skirt by the regulations as they normally would, because they're focusing on the turbo hybrid engine and that project and all that development and everything going on with that. That's what they're focused on. So driver talent is going to mean a lot this year. And I think that for teams, beating Diego Urquidy is probably going to be harder than it's ever been. That being said, I can certainly see a guy like a Shane Park doing what he has to do, doing enough to beat a Diego Urquidy, showing enough development to get himself up there. But it's not going to be easy. It certainly isn't. So, we'll see what goes on with that. But it's going to be interesting, to say the least. But I do think that Shane Park, at the end of the day, does get Diego. But there's certainly a world that I can see Diego Urquidy completing the drive for 5, because, like I said, driver talent is going to mean so much more this year. It's going to mean so much more. That's another thing. We talk about driver talent meaning so much more, and it's also going to mean so much more when it comes to this Rookie of the Year battle. And I think that a lot of people are just pointing Colin Ward saying, oh, it's going to be him. This isn't even a battle. What are we talking about here? And I think that obviously there are 4 rookies, but I think this is going to be a 2-way fight. I think that's relatively obvious, unless, who knows, Tommy Woods just bursts on the scene. I don't think A-Laws really has much of a chance, honestly, with just how behind Tico Bell Motorsports is. But hey, they have an opportunity to level the playing field if they can get the turbo hybrid engine right. And then they can get right back on track in 2026. This is a great opportunity for them to say, screw this year, screw this. we're going to focus on 2026 and get the turbo hybrid engine right. And then, we'll be ahead of all of you guys that focus on this year because we focus all our efforts on next year. But, we'll see. So I don't think A-Laws really has much of a shot. And on oval tracks, of course, he leaves a lot to be desired. Tommy Woods is another guy that, again, on oval tracks that aren't plate tracks, leaves a lot to be desired. Road courses, he's fine. He's better than most. I don't give him that, but that's not really saying much. And Flores, as a whole, I know they're developing. I know they're growing. But now you kind of have to go back to square one with the new driver, a rookie driver at that, in the team, learning, growing, developing. We'll kind of see how the Tommy Woods experiment goes, but I don't think it's going to go too well. So I think it's really going to be between Ward and Edwards for Rookie of the Year. And I think this is going to be a lot closer fight than many people are giving it credit for. I think anyone that thinks that Colin Flores is going to run away with this is fooling themselves. Look, I think that Dexter Ansley's Motorsports is a substantial bit behind Ronnie Wood's Motorsports in terms of equipment. But like I said, Ronnie Wood's Motorsports is not going to be applying as many upgrades and developing their car as much as they normally would be with the new regs on the horizon. This kind of levels the playing field. And maybe Dexter and Motorsports, they don't develop their car, or they just bring it to speed weeks and they say, F it. We're going to throw away this year. We're focusing on 2026. If they do, I 100% get that. But even still, Marcus Edwards proved towards the end of last year he is no slouch of a driver. And he's going to do whatever it takes to win races. And I really do think that it's going to be a tight battle between these two, Ward and Edwards. We saw that battle between these two in the championship last year, and boy, it went down the wire. Obviously, Daugherty ended up getting them both, but these two put on a fantastic fight last year, and it came down to a lot of circumstances out of their control as to why they ended up losing to Daugherty at the end of the day. And that doesn't take away from Daugherty as a talent. He's obviously an incredible driver himself, but, it's just one of them deals. So it's going to be very interesting, the Rookie of the Year fight. But at the end of the day, I will pick Colin Ward just because he does have the equipment advantage and he has won more races. He's won a championship. He has proven more. But I do think Marcus Edwards is going to give him a run for his money. I don't think it's just going to be a runaway that a lot of people really think that it will be. I don't think that at all. But moving on now to the schedule. And basically, nothing changed in the schedule except for, the start times. And for the first time since, I believe, 2012, Colgate Motorsports Park in Springfield, Illinois is not on the calendar. And it sucks. It certainly does to not have such a unique track like Colgate on the schedule, on the docket for 2025. It does. It's such a unique surface and all that, but I do think that the ASC had kind of outgrown it. I really do. And I think that their move to Utah Motorsports Park was a smart one strategically. Another race on the West Coast, so that builds up the West Coast swing now to kick off the second half of the season. It's now up to 3 races. You go to Utah, you go to San Diego, then you go to Denver. I like that. I really do. And, it gives these West Coast fans that want to experience the ASCA another opportunity to do so. Utah, Salt Lake is also an extremely unique track. I've never quite seen anything like it, honestly. Turns 1 and 2 is like a rectangle, and then turns 3 and 4 is like, your normal 1.5 mile oval track. So it's incredibly unique Another race on the West Coast. It's something fresh. It's something new. And I think that after the big schedule shakeup of last year, I think it only adds to that whole ordeal. So I'm really excited to see the first race at Utah Motorsports Park. I believe it's October 29th. I want to say, obviously it's a Saturday, but I'm really excited to see that. I think it's going to be really fun to see these guys going at it. So it's a unique circuit. And truth be told, talking to some NDRL drivers and team owners, the track seems to race a bit like a road course in a way. So shifting is going to be involved and that sort of thing. And with that in mind, I would zero in on Shane Park being the favorite for that race. Just kind of based on that alone, race like a road course, boom, Shane Park. And, if Laquon Scransen is still racing by that time, I'd zero in on him being a favorite as well. Guys like Nick Orchidi, Diego, road course specialist, Randall Woods, Ryan Dixon, they're going to thrive here. So, very interested to see how it plays out, though. I think it's going to be really fun and definitely looking forward to it for sure. The inaugural Workfront 200. We have October 29th around 3 p.m. Eastern time. It's going to be fun. Going to be a fun race for sure. So definitely cannot wait for that, to say the least. Now let's look forward a little bit. Let's talk about silly season. And we already know there is a potential that 3 major rides will be open at the end of this campaign. We already know that Nick Orchidi is retiring. We already know that Laquon Scransen is in a lot of legal trouble. So we already know the 2 is going to be open at Orchidi Bridge Racing, a dynasty in the sport. We already know the 42 has high likelihood of being open. A car that's won 5 races over the past 3 years. The past 2 years, actually, mind you. Past 2 years, five race wins. We know there's a good chance of the 21 being open. Chris Barrymore obviously wants out at his father's team. So yeah, he could very well walk, take his driver's option, not returning the team for 2026. And yeah, who knows who's going to fill that ride. Then we got a few young drivers on the hot seat, I should say. Carson Schmidt and Braden Bennett have already entered negotiations with their respective organizations. I don't think Bennett has actually, but I'm sure he will soon. Obviously, the defending rookie of the year. I don't see why Michael White Racing, even if he does have a sophomore slump, I don't see why they wouldn't retain him for next year. He's proven enough that he deserves at least another year to prove himself. And then Carson's been obviously a race winner towards the end of last year. He's certainly proven more than enough that he deserves a long-term contract extension with Orchidi Bros Racing, especially now with them losing Nick Orchidi. He is a proven commodity that will continue to develop and grow throughout the rest of the decade. I don't know why they wouldn't re-sign him, and that's why they've already entered negotiation. Then, where does Chris Barrymore go? He's got plenty of options. We know the 2 could be open. We know the 42 could be open. Tommy Woods is also on a 1-year deal at Flores Motorsports. So if he flops, the 23 could be open. If Carson Schmidt does not return to the 12, that could be open. If Braden Bennett does not return to the 11, that could be open. Ross Jackson, another guy, former Craftsman champion in a contract year. If Ronnie Woods Motorsports decides they've seen enough, they don't like what they're seeing out of the 24-year-old, that could open up the 88 in a spot at RWM for 2026. So that could be a possibility. What I'm trying to get at here is silly season, I think it's going to be pretty wild. I think it's pretty much a guarantee that Graham Darty will be in Cup for someone next season, whether it's a 2, the 21, whether another team, like who knows, Ronnie Woods Motorsports and Mike White Racing, they try to poach him. That could be another thing. He's going to be in Cup somewhere. Where does he end up? We don't know. Ian Adonde, another young Ford development program prospect. Where does he end up? There's a lot of uncertainty with these rides, and I think that we're going to learn a lot throughout these opening few weeks to kind of see teams gauging how their young drivers are performing and kind of making a decision based off of that. So, silly season, I think it's going to get wild this year, heading into new regulations. Things could get crazy. Things could get hairy. They could get crazy. And let me just tell you, I am certainly looking forward to all of it and certainly excited to keep track of all of it for you on ASCA Twitter. It's going to be super fun, honestly. So I can't wait for silly season. I'm certainly sure you guys can't wait for silly season. And I also certainly cannot wait for speed weeks. And let me just tell you right now, this might be the most kind of uncertain I've been about speed weeks ever. I really especially after last season, I really don't know who the favorite for the Ajax 200 is. We've seen 10 different winners of this race in 11 years. Dan Rogers has long since been retired from the ASCA, of course, races and the Amazon Cup Series now. So he's not a factor. He's the only two-time winner of this event. And, in the past 5 years, we've seen Brent Reddard, we've seen Diego Urquidy, we've seen Ryan Dixon, we've seen Randall Woods, and we've seen Todd Kidd all go to victory lane in this race. Who's going to win this year? Honestly, your guess is as good as mine. I have no idea. It could realistically be anyone. It really could, especially with the package that we are using. We saw Doug Bowden win the most recent race at Ajax Super Speedway, the Fastball 200. He's won here twice in the last 4 years. I think you'd be silly not to consider him as a favorite. Certainly could be a possibility. Will continue the string of 11 different winners in 12 years of the Ajax 200. Todd Kidd, obviously, defending winner. He could be a possibility, but anyone could be. Diego Urquidy, Ryan Dixon, for God's sakes. It could be anyone. And that's what really excites me about the Speed Weeks the most, is like you really have no idea who is going to rise up and really start the season off with a bang, kick their championship off as the points leader. It could be anyone. And, we got two-time Amazon Cup Series champion Andy Moore coming over. He's the only kind of one-off entry for this race. I think it's going to be interesting to see how he does. He has as good of a shot to win as anyone. He's also competing for Charismatic Racing this time around and not Urquidy Bros Racing. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it all plays out. And, your guess is as good as mine. If you got any guesses who's going to win, drop them in the comments below, because I don't know. I really don't. I'll try to make an official prediction sometime during my Ajax 200 preview article. But as of right now, I got no clue. Your guess is as good as mine. So, yeah, that's really it for that one. And that's really it for this episode. Breaking down all the major storylines from this season. How are things going to play out with Brent Reddard being the new highest paid driver in the ASC? How is he going to work out on Michael White Racing? We don't know. Laquon Scransen's legal issues. Chris Barrymore has silly season. Taylor Motorsports their inaugural season in the Cup and Craftsman series. Even in the Craftsman series, watching Darty versus Del Valle this season is going to be incredible. I can't wait to see that title fight. It's going to be super fun. to keep track of. And overall, just this season as a whole, it's going to be, I think it's got potential to be one of the best ever. Is it going to be the best ever? Probably not. You don't hype a season up and say it's going to be the best ever, because you just never know. And last season, it's certainly going to be hard to top. So, going to be interesting seeing how the final year of this current Rex play out. It's going to be the end of an era with Nick Orchidi retiring and the end of the current engine package that we use now. Switching to hybrid engines next year, so much is going to be different for 2026, and I cannot wait for it. So that is it for this edition, the first edition in 2025 of the ASCA Weekly Podcast. I am your host, Charles Fallon, signing out. And we'll see you to recap all of the action from Speed Weeks.